Hi, this is William Ramsey. The following is an interview I did on Hey GB Radio on August 14th of 2010, discussing my then recently published book, Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11, and the New World Order. Again, this is an interview from 7 years ago, and right after I published my first book. Thank you and enjoy.
Good afternoon. This is GB with Hey GB Radio. We are broadcasting live today, and we are doing a pretty interesting show today. We are having William Ramsey on with us today, talking about his book, Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11, and the New World Order. So we're going to bring him on and discuss some of the aspects about the New World Order in connection with Aleister Crowley, who we know is fairly influential with Masonic orders and and things like that. We're going to start right off and get right into it. I have to say I'm pretty interested in hearing what Mr. Ramsey has to say about his book, going into a little bit of depth about Crowley's past. We're going to bring William on. William, are you with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. It was really interesting to hear from you and read up on some of the work you've done. So we're just going to kind of get after it. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I guess first off, as far as the New World Order is concerned, as far as getting into this connection with Aleister Crowley, I guess first off, if you want to start off maybe letting us know what kind of led you into exploring Crowley and what got you interested in this connection with the New World Order to begin with.
That's a good question. I was very interested in 9/11. I realized after a couple of years that the official explanation was a fraud, and so I researched and studied it as much as I could. I was really just reading everything I could on the internet. I got a lot of David Ray Griffin's books, and I kept seeing these numbers that were associated with the event. September 11th happened on the 11th. There was a Flight 11. So I kept seeing these 11s and 93 and 77s. They kept popping up as I did my research, and there was the event of 7/7 London bombing. And, you know, I realized that a lot of these elites, they believe in numerology or numerical significance associated with events. So I started researching, and I realized that these were occult numbers, and they led me back to Crowley.
Yeah, you know, that's interesting. That was sort of, with other people I've talked about, as far as New World Order, this idea concerns, there's been a few people I've run into personally who have done research. We live in the information age, and to get out there and do this research is now more possible thanks to the internet and other means. A lot of people, thank goodness, are kind of going down this road of exploring the truth and knowledge that's out there about world events, about the elites. We talked about the Bilderberg Group on our show here. We talked about the Club of Rome, the Council on Foreign Relations, these types of tops of the pyramid type organizations, if you want to call it that. So that's really interesting to see that road that you've gone down, and which ultimately led to this book, which I haven't read the entire book. I do intend on getting the entire thing. I have read some excerpts and so forth. I have to say, so from what I've seen so far, absolutely mind-blowing stuff, and I'm really interested in learning more and getting more out of what you've done here, which is fantastic. I guess starting off with Crowley, tell us a little bit about his childhood, education, and some of the things that influenced him into, I think, what most people, when they hear the name of Aleister Crowley, pretty much associate him with more of the Satanic Order, things like that. Give us a general discussion about his upbringing.
Okay, he was born in Leamington Spa in England in 1875. He passed away in 1947, so he lived 72 years. He was very well educated. He came from a wealthy brewing family that made lots of money in brewing. It was estimated by one researcher that his inheritance, he inherited about $20 million in our terms. So he was very wealthy. He was tutored in Hebrew and Latin and Greek. When he was growing up, he went to the best what they call public schools in England, but basically the best private schools in England. And he was raised by two parents who were affiliated with a very, what I would term fundamentalist Christian faith, which was the Exclusive Brethren. He was only allowed to read the Bible up until the age of 12 when his father passed away. So he grew up in a very regimented Christian household. He also went to these public schools or private schools in our parlance in England that were extremely brutal. They used to beat the kids. He explains a lot of his time there as being punished. He had a 6-month punishment once that almost killed him. It caused his kidneys to start to shut down. He had to be taken out of school. So he had an upbringing that was very rough. He called it a boyhood in hell, was his time at these schools that he lived at. He explains one of his beatings that he got was 15 minutes of prayer, 15 strokes of the cane, 15 minutes of prayer, 15 more strokes, and more prayer on top of it. So there's this, I think he associated violence with a lot of these Christian, nominally Christian schools. So he exhibited elements of cruelty at a very early age. He talked about a time where he killed a cat just to see if it had 9 lives, and he talks about it. He wrote, by the time he was 47, he wrote his Confessions, which was an autobiography. It was 800 pages long, and he went in detail about his life, his upbringing, etc. Although one can't take it as fully truthful. I think that he was being fairly honest. He probably didn't expect too many people to read it. As he was growing up, he was able to go to Cambridge, one of the top schools in England, with the elite. So he attended there at the Trinity College there with the same kind of luminaries such as Francis Bacon, Isaac Newton, Charles Darwin. So he saw himself, and he really was part of the elite. He was an aristocrat. He was a very well-read person, and he was influenced by Sir Richard Burton, who was kind of an adventurer. And it's important to also recognize that I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, it's important to recognize that Crowley came of age in the late 19th century, just as England was pretty much dominating the world. I mean, that was kind of their form of a new world order. The sun never set on the English Empire. There was just openings in knowledge, transportation, and communications that, to somebody like Crowley, he was able to really become an adventurer, kind of like Sir Richard Burton. He was able to travel around the world twice at a time when that was very unusual, and really kind of drink in a lot of foreign ideas, such as yoga from Hinduism, and he was commonly in Arabic countries. So this wasn't somebody who was like a hermetic figure who wrote books. He was also a literateur. He thought of himself as a poet. Back then, he thought of himself as, I think he said, I was white hot on 3 things: poetry, climbing, and magic. He was an avid mountain climber. He did that for his health, but as he aged, he became. I'm sorry.
It's interesting to see how ultimately, when you hear his name today, and you go back and you do the research on his upbringing, a very self-aware, very intriguing, and somebody who's motivated intrinsically to go out and find his own kind of way, his own knowledge. I understand that his mother called him the Beast.
That's correct. Yes,
this is pretty much where he got this name, and I guess he was called that throughout his life. Pretty much, sure.
Yeah, he took it upon himself. He referred to himself as the Great Beast in all different types of languages. One of the terms he used was to mega theory on, which is the Great Beast. When he wrote there was another kind of biographical book he wrote called Diary of a Drug Fiend, and the lead character is basically him, and the name of that character is the Great Lion. So he associated himself with a lot of the darker elements of Revelations. He said, even of himself, he said he preferred the dragon, the false prophet, the beast, and the scarlet women. And he called his consorts, these women who would help him out in his later magical rituals, as scarlet women. So, yeah, the beast was what his mother did call him, and he kind of interpreted it as it's very religious, something associated with the Book of Revelation. And he really kind of lived it. He was a huge blasphemer as he got older. Some of his writings, I couldn't even put him in the book. My book's a little rough with references to him because I tried to be as honest and truthful, but some of the blasphemies were so vicious that I could not write them down in the book, even though some people have read it and said, oh, this is too much. But
that's understandable. Doing the research I've done from your work, I noticed even in the excerpts you put in there with his poetry and everything and everything as far as his writings coming out of his experiences at these schools in England. Some of it is just, it's absolutely overwhelming. It's pretty harsh material for anybody out there who is listening in. If you go in and you get William's book, it starts off pretty in depth and gets right into this character, this person, Aleister Crowley, and from these schools in England. They were known, like you said, they were known for their harsh cruelty. A lot of things, when we look at Ireland, England, Scotland, and we look at the Catholic Church influence there in the early part of the 1900s, what was going on in these schools with the abuse and things like that. Absolutely, you wonder how somebody would endure that and not have the attitude that Aleister Crowley came out with and lived on through his life, and kind of turning his cheek towards these Christian views and studies and beliefs. It almost takes somebody with strength to not turn the other cheek, but to get out there, do the research, and possibly go into more of the Christian path, etc. But I got to tell you, this Aleister Crowley is just one of the most intriguing figures I think I've read upon. As far as his magical practices, tell us a little bit about that. I understand he was avid in ritual magic.
Yes, for sure. He, when he was at Cambridge, he decided not to pursue. He was interested in chess. He didn't want to pursue that as a career. He was interested in climbing. There wasn't much of a career for that. He thought about public service in the political realm. He didn't want to do that. But what he did, because he was a man of wealth, is dedicate his whole life to the occult. So right after he left Cambridge without obtaining a degree, he got involved in a magical society that some people are familiar with. It's called the Golden Dawn. The Golden Dawn was a late 19th century magical organization. It had some other notable figures such as W.B. Yeats, who was a famous poet. His most notable poem is The Second Coming, which is kind of a mytho-religious poem. It's very interesting. Anyway, so he got involved in the Golden Dawn, and that's really where he got most of his training. He took on the kind of elements of what they taught, and the Golden Dawn back then was considered irregular masonry. It typically drew from the Masonic orders, so it was kind of like an advance on masonry. The three founders were all Masons. It was also influenced by the Rosicrucian Society, so it was kind of a melting pot of all the occult knowledge that was out there in the world back in the late 19th century. So that was a training ground for Crowley. He really advanced up through the grades that were set out by the Golden Dawn, and spent all of his time engaging in magical ritual. And it was kind of an advancement of rituals that were based on Masonry and Rosicrucian grades. There was the primary figure in the Golden Dawn was a man by the name of MacGregor Mathers. Mathers was somebody who, in my opinion, Crowley emulated most of his life. Mathers never worked. He spent most of his time uncovering grimoires in the libraries of Paris and London, and he took on kind of the magical, outer magical views in the sense that he dressed like a magician. He carried around, magical implements. He was constantly conducting rituals. So Crowley really drew a lot from him. He was a scholar and a gentleman by his opinion, and Yeats also was very influenced by him. There were two books that MacGregor Mathers wrote. One was about the Kabbalah, and the other one was the Goetia, which is the Lesser Key of Solomon, which are still prevalent in magical practices today. And those are two that can be traced back to MacGregor Mathers. So there was a heavy influence of the Kabbalah or Kabbalic outlook. So Crowley took all he could from the Golden Dawn, and he was largely involved in ruining the organization. It broke apart and then reformed under different names, but he also learned a lot from Masonry, became a 33rd degree Mason, arguably. He also was John Yarker, who was a very important Mason back then. I think gave him the higher degrees of 90 and 95th degree of Memphis and Mizraim. He then started his own, after writing quite an in-depth amount of literature on the occult, he started his own magical order called the AA. It was Argentum Astrum, which means the Silver Star. And he basically created kind of a magical religion based on certain practices and disciplines. And in 1914, somebody from an organization called the OTO, it was Ordo Templi Orientis, visited Crowley and claimed that Crowley had stole their ideas. But in reality, what happened is Crowley and this German magical order came to the same conclusion, or kind of discovery, I would say, which is the involvement of sexual practices in rituals. So they both came to find that things could be enhanced with the rituals by the use of sex, and also Crowley thought that it could be enhanced by the use of drugs as well. But Crowley was
interesting. When you mentioned the sexuality part of all of that, right off the bat, I think the first thing I thought of was the movie Eyes Wide Shut.
Right.
What other, we see influences of the occult throughout popular culture in movies, TV shows. We even see these symbols used by the occult in advertisements for products, namely mostly in the pharmaceutical industry. From what I've noticed, I tend to not to watch too much television, but when I do, I see these symbols pop up, and I think to myself, wow, most people watching television right now have no idea what they're looking at, especially when we see these plots and these settings in some of the films. Again, like Eyes Wide Shut, and I think you can go further on with that.
Oh, there's tons of references, for sure.
Yeah, I I think the most notable of the symbols would be the all-seeing eye. Is prevalent, and we have it on the back of our dollar bill. Looking at this Masonic aspect, looking into, first off, I will just say, listening to the story about Aleister Crowley and his upbringing reminds me a lot about Adolf Hitler and what he did. He had some wealth, he had some money. Like Crowley, he was with a wealthy family, and you look at Adolf Hitler, who was, after his father died, he came into some money and spent his time kind of going down one avenue and then going down another, and spent time in these cities in Austria. He was a painter, did all this stuff. And it was later on where he found his niche, and he just ran with it, which we all know ended up being the Nazi Party. And it seems like Aleister Crowley kind of followed this similar path. Interestingly enough, kind of during the same time as Adolf Hitler was doing. Interestingly enough.
And there are so I'm sorry.
Oh, I know that Adolf Hitler was involved in the occult. Not to take anything away from Crowley at the moment, but do you think that there is any influence that Aleister Crowley may have played into Adolf Hitler through possibly the Thule Society or the Theosophical Society?
That's a good question. Crowley was very aware of the occult happenings all throughout the world. He was very well informed. He was very familiar with Theosophical people. He was trying to always get in contact with them. Crowley was a type of person that people outside of the occult really would not really understand, in the sense that he believed that you should just join every occult organization. Crowley was not strictly a Mason. He was a Mason, an OTO member, a member of the AA. He was arguably a member of witches' covens. So he was not afraid to cover all bases. And there are connections between Crowley being in Germany in the early 30s. And most of his writings, he emphasized the primary word of his religion was thelema, which is Greek for will. And Hitler also believed in the power of the will. There was a film by Leni Riefenstahl called Triumph of the Will.
Triumph of the Will, yep.
Yeah, so, and, one of the aspects of people who knew Hitler said that he had an overbearing willpower. Other than others, he had a good memory, and he was, relatively well informed. But he said that he had willpower to overcome, and that was one of the things that Crowley emphasized, was this notion of the human will. So they were similar in that regard. They also had a connection. One of Crowley's early followers was a person by the name of J.F.C. Fuller. He came up with the idea of massed tank attacks as a breakthrough as far as military procedures, and it wasn't adopted by the British. They were more of a seafaring nation, but the Germans were heavily influenced by his ideas, and he was one of two Englishmen invited to Hitler's 50th birthday. So there's a direct correlation between Crowley to J.F.C. Fuller to Hitler right there that a lot of historians and people wouldn't emphasize because they don't see Crowley as important. But they should, because Crowley's ideas and Hitler's ideas were almost the same as far as his idea of an ideal state, about racism, and about his view of humanity. Crowley said that we should have no compunction in utilizing the natural qualities of the bulk of mankind. We do not insist on trying to train sheep to hunt foxes or lecture on history. We will look after their physical well-being and enjoy their wool and mutton. In this way, we shall have a contented class of slaves who accept conditions of existence as they really are and enjoy life with the quiet wisdom of cattle. So he had a real slave mentality and a neo-Darwin, and Hitler basically ran a slave state. He had huge gulags where if he didn't send people, it's kind of an awful story, but if he didn't send people to death, he was working them in hard labor camps, So he had this whole notion of a slave mentality, and one of the common phrases that Crowley used was "the slave shall serve." That was common in his one of his books. It was the intro to one of his books. When he categorized and put together his AA, his magical order, he took everything that he had written and categorized them by book. So he called them Liber 1, Liber 93, all these numbers that are important to him, but Liber just means book. But in his book 77, and here you see the 77 again, the intro to book 77 says the slave shall serve. And he called that book 77 the rights of man. And it's basically the idea of what I would consider the Luciferian idea of human freedom, which is, do what you want, and if anybody gets in your way, kill them. I mean, literally, Crowley said to kill them if they get in your way. And that was one of Crowley's biggest dictums, or his primary phrase was, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And that's an 11-letter phrase, 11-word phrase with 11 syllables. So you see the 11 pop up again. But so there it is, the will, do what thou wilt. So that this whole notion, so whereas there may not have been. And there are people who have argued that Crowley was in contact with Hitler, but I couldn't find those historical connections yet. And I'm still, I finished the book, but I'm still kind of trying to find little holes in my understanding. But
yeah, I'm sure that there's. I mean, could we expect a part 2 possibly to your current book? It seems like there's so much out there.
Yeah, I think that I'll probably do another edition in time, but I actually had a significant amount of other material that I was going to include that I took out, and that material was really all the people who were influenced by Crowley, and it's a long list. So I just decided, I'm going to do this and try not to, a lot of Crowley biographers whitewash him. They don't talk about some of his darker elements. So I just wanted to do a kind of, finish my biography of him and make the connection to 9/11 and the New World Order fairly apparent and make that argument. And then I just cut off all the other stuff. So my next book will be The Children of the Beast, which is all the people that have been influenced by Crowleyism, like Charles Manson, Jack Parsons in California, L. Ron Hubbard and Timothy Leary. A lot of people don't know those connections. Robert Anton Wilson, Kinsey, who was the sexologist, Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, Ozzy Osbourne. All these guys know Crowley. They just don't, publicize or their influence by Crowley. So, and it's important because that just shows how much Crowley's influence has suffused our 20th century culture, at least in the Western world.
Exactly. You mentioned this Luciferian ideal. Try and sum that up for us about what this Luciferian at its base root is.
Well, that's a good question. I think that I think that in Crowley's cases, in Crowley's situation, he really thought that he was a Luciferian. He believed in the devil, and he was a follower of the devil. And his views were, this whole notion of a slave state. He believed in the feudal system was the ideal system. He believed in kind of destroying what he thought were tainted stock, like killing off the unfit, kind of just like Hitler. So as far as Luciferianism, and that's the interesting thing about Crowley. He wasn't just an occultist, but he believed in the political, application of his ideas. So as far as, his Luciferianism, it's all based on these societies, and a lot of these societies, some are blatantly Luciferian, but he said that at the AA, for example, the head of the AA is the devil. So that was his organization. The OTO has an outer head of the order, and you can imagine what the inner head of the order is. And then, at the higher levels of Freemasonry, that's when you really get into kind of the Luciferian tradition as explained by Albert Pike.
Yeah, this I've talked about Freemasonry on the show many times, and trying to get information out to people about what Freemasonry really is. And when you get down to the hardcore depth of studying it, it really leads you down a path that sometimes you feel yourself being drawn to because it's so interesting, but at the same time, you sometimes feel yourself kind of leaning back from it for a little bit or taking a break from it because it is so in-depth. It's stuff that is just, it's not mainstream. It is a cult, meaning, things that are hidden. The whole idea of this Luciferianism, I ran across a video of Bill Cooper, who was a gentleman that we all know was involved with a radio show for many years, exploring this idea of the New World Order, trying to alert people to the fact of a police state coming in, especially to the United States, but throughout the world. And his summary of what this Luciferian idea is as related to the Freemasonic Order was absolutely mind-blowing. And he mentions it getting back to the Garden of Eden, where, growing up in a Christian household, we are taught and believe that in the Garden of Eden you have Adam and Eve who were put there by God, made by God in the garden. They were given the garden, and they were tenders of the garden, and they were free and blameless. And people who had never ever dreamt of feeling pain or suffering, and they were kept in the garden by God, and God told them one thing: not to eat from the tree of knowledge. And from the Freemasonic order, from what Bill Cooper kind of sums up, is that the Luciferian idea is that Adam and Eve were held prisoner by an unjust God in the Garden of Eden, and as Eve went to the tree of knowledge and was met by the snake or the reptile there, the snake, or Satan as we know, coaxed her into eating from the tree, telling her that ye surely will not die. And he goes into the fact that Bill Cooper goes into the fact that Eve is told that God doesn't want you to eat from that tree because it will give you knowledge, the knowledge that He has, and tells Eve that, with this knowledge you will be free from being imprisoned in the garden. And
that's an interesting idea, because that's kind of emulates exactly what Crowley thought about. His concept of freedom and liberty was, freedom from restriction, so freedom to be not free from kind of moral constraints. So it's kind of similar to that kind of view of, the Garden of Eden story.
Yeah, just amazing insight from Bill Cooper with some of that idea, these ideas. Bill Cooper's a totally different topic, different show, but I've mentioned it.
He's very interesting. What he achieved without the internet was, for me, astonishing. I really
absolutely
thought was incredible, and also he had that whole idea of Mystery Babylon, like it's all connected, and the way Crowley kind of operated in the occult is it all really was connected. Some people may perceive these institutions as independent of each other, but a lot of time if somebody's involved in one occult organization, they're typically involved in a lot of others. So
exactly. It's interesting also to note, when we talk about Crowley, we talk about Freemasonry, we talk about this Luciferian idea. Excuse me. The term that it has kind of come under, which is humanism. This idea of humanism that we see in the Humanist Manifesto 1 and 2, and the influence that it's going into the United Nations. Some research we've done on the United Nations is that they are, some of the people there are heavily influenced by this idea of humanism, which I think, would you agree the humanism kind of reflects from that Crowleyism, like you said?
Well, I think that there's that same strain of, like, the man is God. Crowley thought that, like going back to Book 77, another intro to Book 77 is that man is God, or God is man. So in a general humanism, maybe not, but in the specific type of kind of human first or we're first principle, Crowley definitely thought that man was it. So they didn't, it's a kind of rejection of the Almighty, in my opinion, and I think he had exemplified that. He called, like, the devil the angel who made gods of men. So you see this kind of similar theme of, this kind of, that form of humanism, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting to see the shape of our world culture or U.S. culture today being slowly ingrained with this idea of this humanism, and not even knowing it. It's sometimes overwhelming, and it's sometimes answers questions about why things are in mainstream media and all this. Man can save himself is the idea, and we find this in these global warming efforts and what have you. As far as the global warming thing is concerned, I know the idea of this Gaia religion, I call it a religion. That's debatable, but I personally call it a religion, which is Mother Nature, and that man worships the creation and not the creator, and that
right.
Mother Earth is going to save us and all this stuff. It's absolutely unbelievable, and pretty much the reason why we do this show is to kind of open people's eyes to the fact that man cannot save himself. And with the global warming thing, it's almost this strange thought pattern going around the world with the elites and these people going to like the conferences that they had in Copenhagen last December. We try to control the Earth. If this thing is cyclical over thousands of years, Earth has cycles, goes through geological cycles, and the fact that we think that we can actually stop the Earth from going through a cyclical pattern, I mean, that is that goes right into pride, and pride leads itself into this humanist idea, and humanist leads its ideas into this Luciferian idea. It's just
Agreed.
amazing, these connections.
Absolutely.
It's just absolutely mind-blowing.
I totally agree with you. The humanism also is like the communist view, which is, we can do it without God. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The humanism is the next step right there is to okay, we can make our own decisions. Man is God. There's no God but man. And these, what I would consider blasphemous statements and basing their lives upon those statements as well.
Yeah, it's and we always tell people, if you're listening in, we always tell people to do your own research. We live in the information age, and this information is out there. I always tell people, kill their television, and get online, do some research, educate yourself about the things going on in the world. We live in some extraordinary times right now, politically and spiritually, and becoming knowledgeable about the world around you that is hidden, I think is, or shall I say, hidden from the mainstream, is one of those ways where you will ultimately find truth in this seemingly wicked world. Your book, the idea of September 11th, you mentioned numerology and things of that nature. Give us like a brief timeline, if you can, sum up like a brief timeline of possibly this Crowley influence into that day of September 11th.
Well, that's a good question. So Crowley, he basically created a religion. It was a Luciferian religion. He emphasized certain numbers. He used the Kabbalah, and his two main words in his kind of approach were thelema and agape. Those are both Greek words, but in the Kabbalah they both equal 93. And he was interested in contacting entities. One of the main entities that he contacted was by the name of Awas, and it translated to him the Book of the Law. And in Hebrew, under Hebrew Kabbalah, Awas equals 93 again. So under his system, the 93s pop up quite frequently. Then you have his 77, which Liber Oz, or 77 equates to OZ, which is a whole different, occult connection. But he had his book 77, which was The Rights of Man. He also, 77 are the 77 names of the devil in Anton Sandor LaVey's The Satanic Bible. So those two numbers are very important. And then 11 is like the conjunction of the hexagram and the pentagram. That those two together equal 11. 11 is the number of perdition. That even goes back to the traditions involved in the Golden Dawn. And it's also the 11 letters of his, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And so 11s always pop up. Well, I recognize that all 4 plane flight numbers on the date of September 11th were 11, 77, 93, and 175. And 175 in Crowley's system that he created in the AA, 175 is how you do a ritual to adhere yourself to a god by adoration. So you choose your god, and then you do the ritual to kind of adhere yourself to his principles. So that
sounds like the idea in Islam with death. You know, in Islam, the belief of dying and going on to meet all the virgins, basically.
Yeah, so it's so those numbers suffuse the events, and that event, you know, changed our world. It was like a push forward for what could be called the New World Order, a new state, a state of global warfare. We lost a lot of our rights through what was called the Patriot Act, which was not patriotic at all. We had elections that were stolen. We had a large amount of these bombings that took place. We had this fake terror, or the war on terror, which is some kind of weird mind control. You know, new 1984, George Orwell assault through our mass media. So we have a controlled mass media as well. So for me, 9/11 was a crucial event of our lives. You know, I write about it. I reference Shakespeare in my book. I said, for this revolt of thine, methinks, is like another fall of man. Like, that's the way I viewed 9/11. And it's just a complete mind control to actually assume that 1919 terrorists somehow hijacked the most sophisticated defense system in the world's history and somehow pulled that off. So for me, 9/11 is a complete magic trick. It's a fraud. And it also has occult connections.
Yeah, I mean, that ultimately, from what you've summed up so far about this numerology coming out of Crowley, it's almost, you know, it's how could it be a coincidence that the flight numbers all match up to these occult symbols and this occult numerology? How could it be a coincidence? And I think
just don't know.
Question we need to ask, you know.
I agree. I mean, I've tried to, like, as an armchair statistician, if you took like a pool of 175 numbers and then ascribed the top 4 to, like, the most important as they were in Crowley's system, and then, you know, what's the chance of those 4 happening on that date out of 175? And just a simple equation there, it's infinitesimal, the likelihood of those 4 important numbers showing up right then, you know. So, you know, in my opinion, statistics is more art than science, but still, it's very unlikely.
Yeah, and I know many people have questions about 9/11, questions in how the buildings fell. Building 7 pops up all the time. British News, from what I've done, aired the news about the buildings falling about 20 minutes before they even fell. And there's just all these little tiny nuances on that day that when you get down to the root of it and you look at it, they don't add up like you would imagine that they should. So I think it's in human nature to ask questions and kind of put these connections together. And I think it's something that the mainstream media has really messed up on with silencing these questions. We should be allowed to question our government in any matters. I mean, that's just what the United States is about. Is about questioning and about getting into the topics that the people want to talk about and explore. And the whole 9/11 Commission book and report and all of that. I mean, it's almost like a lost read, really, and they don't really reveal much detail into these questions that we have, and leading into this influence by numerology and these occult masters like Aleister Crowley.
I agree. I mean, I think that the mass media isn't really there to inform; it's to misinform, and it serves the interests of a largely oligarchical society. You know, they back up the large corporations and the political elite. So, for me, it's a totally corrupt and vile media system right now, as far as information goes.
Yeah, and I think I forget who it was, but it was a talk show radio host, mainstream, surprisingly refers to the mainstream media, not as the mainstream media, but as the propaganda matrix or the propaganda machine, which if you watch enough television, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get fed information. It's just like going to university. It's just like going to college. It's just like going to work if you work in a corporation around the world. Interestingly enough, the corporations around the world, it's amazing to see how structured they have become when it comes to this whole idea of this new world order, with its top-down pyramid shape. And I think David Icke puts it best. I'm not sure if you're familiar with David Icke's work, but I think he puts it best when he says we are taught to believe that the power of the pyramid is at the top, when it's not. We the ones at the lower are the ones holding it up,
right.
Holding that top of the pyramid up. And David Icke has done a great job of getting some of this information out there and waking people up to the reality of the structure of power in the world. And it kind of just blows me away when I talk about the structure of power in the world on the show, and I talk with people in public and family, friends, and how could you not believe that there's a larger power structure in the world when every day you go into work and there's a CEO of the company, next down from him is the VP, and next down from him is the so forth and so forth, and you go right down the pyramid, and how we would not be able to recognize that larger structure in a global kind of quote-unquote corporation is nearsighted, I think. And
I agree.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind-blowing, some of this stuff. The New World Order. We hear this term. I know it has other terms such as the kind of the New Order of the Ages, which we get from Freemasonry. In your book, do you get into the political aspects of this New World Order, maybe stemming out of the League of Nations, et cetera, after World War II?
Not much. I just kind of emphasized what Crowley was up to and how he influenced the ideas of what I consider the New World Order, the notion of a slave state, a feudal system, which I think we're going into, and other people like John Coleman have emulated that same. Like in his book, The Committee of 300, he recognizes a feudal system. So you see these correlations. You also see correlations between Crowley and people like Aldous Huxley, and who's Aldous Huxley's brother was Julian Huxley, the head of UNESCO. So Crowley actually painted Aldous Huxley's portrait, and Aldous Huxley wrote a book called Do What You Will, which is very similar to Crowley's dictum. So you see that his ideas or his connections are there with people who, for me, Brave New World was almost like a prophetic book, not just like 1984, but there was also that kind of lack of warning. Like 1984 was something, Brave New World was something like an ideal state, and we remember Aldous Huxley's speech to Berkeley where he talked about, doping the public and making people love their servitude, and I think that you can see people loving their servitude in an American state where people, 1/5 of the population is on antidepressants or hooked on drugs, and you see constant lies put out by the mass media, lies about the war, lies about the food you eat, lies about the financial system that you're involved in, And so I just see like Crowley as an influence. I don't see him as an architect, but more of like an inspiration. And you have to have that evil will to do that to your fellow man. So for me, he had that. He believed in an aristocratic two-tiered society, and that's kind of what you see today. Is the people at the top are getting richer, while the poor are just being thrust down into degradation and enslavement. He said there's only one solution: to pick out the diamonds from the clay, cut them, polish them, and set them as they deserve. Attempt no idiotic experiments with the muck of the mind. That's like the average person. You will observe that I'm advocating an aristocratic revolution, and so I am. And you can kind of even see the New World Order. I think the guy who wrote the book on the Bilderberg Society, he said Daniel Estelin was his name, but he said the New World Order is the Old World Order, and that's really the truth. A lot of the New World Order formulations are from old line families in the United States and Europe, pulling the strings on corporations and media and really dominating everything we've seen, at least in the last 10 years and more than that. And it moves against at least what I thought were our ideas as Americans, which is egalitarianism, meritocracy, dispersion of power. The formulation of this country was based on state-federal bifurcation, three tripartite part of government. So the guys the founding fathers who formulated our country were aware of you don't want to have too much centralized power in anything, and you want to have different parts of the governments fighting against each other. Well, we see that move against that type of tripartite government into what was called the imperial presidency, or I forgot what Cheney talked about it as. But so I see that kind of desire for a feudal state, a top-down, the slave shall serve, aristocratic. And Crowley was an unabashed aristocrat. He really had no idea or no concept of actually having a real job. He had always relied upon his inheritance, and when he ran out on that, he basically was a parasite towards his followers, and they had to send him money for him to survive. So he really had no correlation to anybody middle class or working class. And so I see that as an influence on our present kind of political environment in a global sense.
Absolutely. Crowley as the whisper in the ear of the elites, directing and guiding policy, global policy and state policy over the past decades, and absolutely influencing this idea of this New World Order. And on past shows, I've just kind of reiterated to people about the year 1989, which is, to me personally, one of the most interesting years in my lifetime. And, we are taught that 1989 was the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the end of communism, where really it was a beginning. It was a beginning of this New World Order. And George Bush Sr. outlines that in his speech to the nation. And from going forward from there, we see UN developments into Agenda 21, which is nothing but seemingly a New World Order constitution outlined in sustainable growth and sustainable ideas as far as nature is concerned. So there's this nature input, and it's interesting about nature, how you can get into some of this magic that Crowley was involved in, and leading up through what we have today, which you've been talking about with these influences in today's culture, and the public policies that are going on now. Definitely influenced by Aleister Crowley and his ideas on will, like you said at the beginning of the show, this idea of the will and do what thou wilt, this idea of being free from constraints. But funny enough, free from constraints, but having the top of the pyramid elites outlining how we feel about our current constraints. trickling down into everyday life with how we perceive going to work, getting our stuff done for the day, and going down the list of our routinized existence, which kind of ultimately leaves us blind and in the dark unless you go out and you do the research like you've done for your book.
And that was an interview I did on GB Radio concerning my book, Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11, and the New World Order. The rest of the interview can be found on my YouTube channel at William Ramsey Investigates. I also just wanted to let people know that my documentary, The Smiley Face Killers, who is abducting, torturing, and murdering young college-age men in the US and UK, is available now on Vimeo. So all you have to do is go into Vimeo, type in my name, William Ramsey. The movie will pop up. Thank you for listening.